The American luxury car buyer expected exactly one thing: an incredibly smooth, unapologetically massive V8 engine that drank gasoline like water. For decades, Cadillac sold the ultimate land yacht. The bigger the engine, the better. But suddenly, the world changed. The government demanded fuel efficiency, gas lines were stretching around city blocks, and the traditional American V8 was placed on the endangered species list. Then, Cadillac introduced something nobody saw coming: an engine with a mind of its own. A mechanical marvel that actively erased its own cylinders while you were driving down the highway. It was supposed to be a triumph of modern engineering. It was supposed to save General Motors. Instead, it became one of the most spectacular, self-destructive mechanical failures in automotive history. The problem was obvious. The solution wasn't. The corporate average fuel economy standards had just hit Detroit like a sledgehammer. Cadillac's engineering team was trapped in an impossible paradox. Their wealthy customers completely refused to drive underpowered, noisy four-cylinder economy cars. They demanded the prestige, the whisper-quiet idle, and the effortless torque of a massive 6-liter V8. But federal regulators demanded miles per gallon. You can't cheat physics. It takes a massive amount of fuel to keep a 4,000-pound luxury barge moving. So the engineers asked a question that bordered on science fiction. What if the engine could change its own physical size? Think about it. You only need the full brute force of a V8 when you are accelerating from a dead stop or passing a truck on a steep hill. When you are just cruising down a flat highway at 65 miles per hour, your engine is barely breaking a sweat. It takes maybe 30 horsepower to maintain that momentum. Those extra cylinders, they are just burning fuel for the sake of burning fuel. The engineering team came up with a concept they called displacement on demand. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Give the driver a V8 when they step on the gas, but once they reach cruising speed, seamlessly turn it into a V6. If they are just coasting, shut it down to a four-cylinder. It was like having three completely different engines bolted under the hood, swapping places in real time based on how hard your right foot pushed the pedal. But turning that concept into cold, hard metal, that was an engineering puzzle that no automaker had ever successfully solved. To make it work, the engine couldn't just stop feeding fuel to the unused cylinders. If the pistons were still moving up and down, pumping air in and out through the valves, they would create a massive drag. Imagine riding a multi-person bicycle with 8 people pedaling to get up a hill, but once you reach the top, 4 of them stop pedaling and lock their legs. The remaining 4 have to drag that dead weight along. They needed a way to completely disconnect the valves from the engine's camshaft, while the engine was still spinning at 2,000 revolutions per minute. And they had to do it perfectly, silently, without the driver ever feeling a shudder. They had a solution. It was completely insane. To make this physics-defying trick a reality, Cadillac engineers partnered with the Eaton Corporation. Their weapon of choice was a brilliantly clever piece of hardware, the electromechanical blocking plate solenoid. To understand how it works, imagine a child's seesaw. In a normal engine, the camshaft pushes up on one end of a metal arm, the seesaw, and the other end pushes down to open the engine's air valve. The pivot point in the middle is solid and fixed. But Eaton's engineers designed a seesaw where the pivot point could magically slide out of the way. When the car's computer decided it was time to shut down a cylinder, an electrical signal fired the solenoid. A tiny mechanical blocker plate shifted position. Without that solid pivot point, the camshaft simply pushed the entire rocker arm straight up into the air. The valve never opened. It stayed completely sealed, trapping the spent exhaust gases inside the cylinder. The moving piston now acted like a giant rubber ball bouncing inside an air spring, preserving energy rather than fighting a vacuum. But mechanical trickery was only half the battle. Who or what was going to conduct this high-speed mechanical orchestra? Keep in mind, this was 1980. Most computers still took up entire desks. Yet, Cadillac installed an onboard microprocessor capable of making 300,000 calculations per second. It monitored engine speed, coolant temperature, exhaust flow, and manifold air pressure with obsessive precision. If you were cruising steadily above 30 miles per hour, the computer severed the connection, dropping the massive 6-liter engine down to 6 cylinders, and finally down to a fuel-sipping 4. When Cadillac debuted the L62 V8-6-4 engine for the 1981 model year, they dropped it into their most prestigious, heavy-hitting models, the Seville, the DeVille, and the Eldorado. They even installed a futuristic digital display on the dashboard called the MPG Sentinel, which proudly glowed with the number 8, 6, or 4, showing the driver exactly how smart their luxury car was. In controlled laboratory testing, it worked beautifully. It delivered a genuine 15% boost in highway fuel economy. It should have been hailed as the greatest automotive innovation of the decade. But a car does not drive on a pristine laboratory testing rig. It drives in the chaotic, messy, unpredictable real world of bad gasoline, sudden traffic, and heavy-footed drivers. And the real world was about to tear Cadillac's crowning achievement to shreds. When real customers took these cars out on the highway, the V8-6-4 didn't just experience minor glitches. It suffered a complete mechanical nervous breakdown while hurtling down the interstate at 60 miles per hour. The very system designed to optimize the engine was turning it into a violent, shaking mess. But solving the mechanical puzzle had created an entirely new, catastrophic nightmare. The engineers weren't finished yet. The core issue was speed. Not the speed of the car, but the speed of the primitive computer trying to control it. In a controlled laboratory setting, a throttle changes smoothly and predictably. But on a rainy, chaotic highway during rush hour traffic, a human driver's foot is erratic. You tap the brakes, you punch the gas to merge, you lift off to coast. The onboard microprocessor, running at what we now consider Stone Age processing speeds, simply couldn't keep up with human unpredictability. It was like a master conductor trying to lead a fast-paced symphony over a dial-up internet connection. The lag was absolutely fatal. When a driver slammed the accelerator to the floor to pass a massive semi-truck, the computer had to process the demand, send the electrical signal, activate the solenoids, and physically lock the valvetrain back together. In the real world, this resulted in a terrifying, dangerous delay. The heavy car would hesitate, bog down helplessly, and then suddenly lurch forward with a violent mechanical shudder as the dormant cylinders slammed aggressively back to life. And that was only if the mechanical components actually cooperated. The sophisticated blocking plate solenoids were bolted directly into the cylinder heads. They were forced to operate in a punishing environment of extreme heat, intense friction, and splashing engine oil. If an owner delayed an oil change by even a few hundred miles, microscopic layers of carbon sludge built up inside the tiny mechanisms. A solenoid would jam. The computer would command the engine to drop to 4 cylinders, but one mechanical plate would inevitably stick. Suddenly, the engine was firing on 5 or 7 cylinders. An unbalanced V8 firing on odd, asymmetrical intervals doesn't just run poorly, it thrashes. It shakes the entire chassis like an industrial washing machine, spinning at top speed with a heavy cinder block trapped inside. The engineering team watched in sheer horror as their masterpiece devoured itself. They hadn't failed in their mechanical theory. They were simply betrayed by the technological limits of 1981. They needed computing power that wouldn't exist for another 20 years, and sensor fidelity that hadn't even been invented yet. But they were trapped with the hardware of their era. The reaction was swift, public, and brutal. Dealership service bays were suddenly flooded with furious executives and luxury buyers whose brand-new, premium Cadillacs were violently stalling in busy intersections. Massive class-action lawsuits were drafted. Cadillac's legendary reputation for building America's smoothest, most effortless cruisers was actively dissolving in real time. Out of pure desperation, rogue mechanics and frustrated owners discovered a brutally simple fix. If you reached under the hood and snipped a single green wire connecting the transmission to the computer, the electronic brain was lobotomized. It never knew the car had shifted into top gear. The system permanently locked into 8-cylinder mode. The most brilliant, sophisticated displacement on demand system in the world was entirely defeated by a $2 pair of wire cutters. Cadillac quietly killed the V8-6-4 after just one single, agonizing year of production. It was universally branded an absolute disaster, a corporate misstep that cost General Motors millions in repairs and reputation. But here is the truly fascinating part of the mystery. The engineers were absolutely right. They weren't crazy, they were just early. That catastrophic failure held a mechanical secret that would eventually rewrite the rules of the entire automotive industry. Fast forward 24 years. The calendar rolls into the mid-2000s. Gasoline prices are violently spiking again, and federal regulators are once again tightening the noose on emissions. Automakers across the globe are staring down the exact same impossible puzzle Cadillac faced in 1980. They need V8 power with 4-cylinder efficiency. Only this time, the world has caught up to the vision. Engineers now had access to microprocessors that made the 1981 Cadillac computer look like a wooden abacus. They had ultra-precise digital sensors, highly refined synthetic oils, and advanced fuel injection systems capable of calculating atmospheric pressure in fractions of a millisecond. General Motors didn't throw away the disgraced V8-6-4 blueprints. They dusted them off, fed them into modern supercomputers, and perfected them. They rebranded the concept as active fuel management. Chrysler quickly followed suit for their legendary Hemi V8, calling it the multi-displacement system. Honda adapted it for their V6 engines. Today, almost every massive V8 engine on the road, from a rugged Chevy Silverado towing a heavy boat to a high-performance Corvette tearing down a straightaway, uses this exact technology. But how did they cure the mechanical nightmares of 1981? They threw out the clunky electromechanical seesaws. Instead, modern engineers use specialized hydraulic valve lifters. When the modern computer decides it is time to drop to 4 cylinders, it doesn't rely on a tiny metal plate. It uses the engine's own pressurized oil to instantly collapse the lifter. The transition takes less than 20 milliseconds. It is faster than the blink of a human eye. It is the difference between sending a slow, erratic telegraph and seamlessly streaming a 4K video. You never feel the shudder. You never feel the hesitation. You just get brute force when you step on the gas and quiet efficiency when you coast. The 1981 Cadillac V8-6-4 is frequently thrown onto lists of the worst engines ever manufactured. It is mocked as a corporate disaster, a punchline in automotive history. But looking back, that reputation is fundamentally unfair. The Cadillac engineering team wasn't incompetent. They were pioneers trapped in the wrong decade. They saw the exact future of automotive engineering with crystal clarity. They knew exactly what the world was going to need. They were just forced to build that future using the crude, heavy, primitive tools of the past. They took the brutal arrows of public humiliation and massive financial loss so that the next generation of engineers could safely walk the path they cleared. So the next time you are cruising down the interstate in a modern, heavily powered vehicle, coasting effortlessly while your digital dashboard proudly boasts 25 miles per gallon, give a quiet nod of respect to the men and women at Cadillac in 1981. They didn't build a bad engine. They built a time machine, and it mechanically destroyed itself simply because it was far too smart for its own time.